Good evening to all of our Jus Hindi viewers. I'm Aashmeeta Yogiraj, and this is Straight Talk. Politics is on the tip of everyone's tongue nowadays. Whether it's the recent re-election of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi or the upcoming presidential election taking place here in the United States next year. While federal politics gets all of the attention, it's really politics at a local level that most impacts the everyday lives of citizens. To that end, I have someone here with me today who is working at the local level to bring a change in his community. Please help me welcome Mr. Adil Ahmed.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here. Adil, before we get started, I want to give our viewers a little bit of a background about you.
Yes.
So Adil recently ran for commissioner of West New York in New Jersey earlier this month, and he's a former Columbia University graduate. He currently is a resident of West New York, New Jersey, and he's practicing as an attorney right now in the state. Adil is a son of Indian immigrants who was born here in America and is a true representation of a second-generation Indian American who is working to expand the rights of minorities and also the working class here in the United States. While his run for commissioner was unsuccessful, Adil still has work to do. Adil, looking back, how would you describe your campaign?
It was, so first of all, thank you for that introduction. I appreciate that. Shout out to everyone here too, came out from West New York. To describe the campaign, I would describe it as a thrill. We were out there every day, we were knocking on doors, we were having really good one-on-one conversations with families all across town. And if I had to describe it, it was like a roller coaster, and I really felt like we were on a high the whole time. Mm-hmm. Because once we really got into it, we realized that our message of building a government that works for all people was a message that wasn't actually ever being delivered. And I'm a lawyer, and I've really tried to bubble issues down to specific ways to solve problems. And we came up with very specific solutions about the everyday bread and butter issues of just cleaning roads and fixing buildings and fixing parks and making sure that no matter where you came from, what your economic background was, what your cultural background was, that you felt welcome in a town that is just as diverse as West New York. And so my experience was definitely, what I went into it thinking was the message that I thought that we were going to deliver was definitely received, like 150%, and I think what we were able to do was give people a message and have them feel involved in something that they have never trusted for many young people in their entire lifetimes. And so if I also think about it, I'm very humbled and I'm very proud of what we built, and like you said, like the work's not done. We were unsuccessful, but what we built from scratch in 2 to 3 months. And people who do politics in New Jersey and all across the United States, they spend their entire lives planning for elections just like this one. At the local level. They plan on becoming a mayor of a big town, big city like West New York from being 5 years old, and they're still planning on it, and I think what we showed was sometimes you just have to go for it. Sometimes you just have to run and be bold and be confident that if you listen to people and you care and you sort of take a step back and really just want to serve and find the right solutions that people want to see, that you're going to be all right. But it really takes that step.
So that, all sounds fantastic. It seems like your campaign was, not just a learning lesson, but actually had some positive impacts, not just in your life, but in the lives of the folks that you interacted with.
Yes.
That being said, hindsight is 20/20.
Yeah.
Looking back, what would you do differently?
Yeah, I think looking back, I would have started earlier. So I would have definitely started last year. Okay. If I had to think about all the preparation that goes into a local election in New Jersey, it requires a lot of fundraising. You have to raise a good amount of money to run a very successful campaign. And I would looking back in it, I realized, oh wow, like that's what I could have used money for. I didn't realize, before I went into this, I was like, oh wow, like it costs like $10,000 to send a mailer to 10,000, 12,000 people. Now West New York has about 65,000 people, but we were focusing on people who were just likely to vote. If we had all the money in the world, I would have sent a mail to all 65,000 people every other week, and so that's the kind of budget we were looking at. So I would have started earlier. I would have raised money earlier. I would have started building a team a little earlier. When I think about what we did was I'm new in politics in New Jersey. It's something that I've always been passionate about, and jumping into it was just really like a gut decision, realizing that our community really wants a break from the past. Our community really wants someone who is a problem solver and who isn't thinking about themselves, but is thinking about what the community is suffering from and how you solve those issues. And so, so if I think about, what the past 2 months, I would have broken it down into a year, and I would have had everything lined up going into like December. I would have had all the money raised. I would have had my team built. I would have figured out where my office was going to be. I would have had the office built out. Like all of that took time. Like we didn't actually have an office up and running until like 4 weeks before the election.
Oh wow.
And so so 4 weeks before the election, you're really just focusing on knocking doors every day.
Yeah.
And we were raising money. We were cleaning the office. We were putting stuff on the walls. We were telling people we had an office who didn't know we had an office. So it was a lot of that. But it was so I would have started earlier, but I wouldn't have traded the experience either, because what we built, I think, the community. If we had not raised that much money and we started much earlier, I think the community still would have gravitated to us because they've never seen a grassroots campaign in North Jersey. It's never happened. In the way politics works in our area, you're really kind of knighted. You kind of start at a really young age, and someone determines that, like, when you're 18, you're going to be the next mayor, the next council member of this town. Like, you start that early. And so I think we did a really good job, and the town is tired of that. So I think if we started earlier knocking on doors, maybe that would have been great too.
So you listening to you speak, and a little bit of the background that we know about you from research, you knocked on a lot of doors.
Yes.
And that's how grassroots should be, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of feedback did you most commonly hear from the community in your interactions with these folks?
Yes. So maybe taking a step back is, I'm Indian. Obviously, my family's from South India, from Hyderabad. And one thing I learned is I speak Spanish. And so in a town like West New York, it's very important to be able to speak Spanish, because if you can't speak Spanish, you can't actually listen and talk to the community. It's a town where 77% of the community is from a Latino background, Central, South America. And so it's important to be able to just want to listen and to get better at that. Now, I'm not a perfect Spanish speaker, and I don't claim to be, but I work hard at trying to get better every day, and I understand far better than I speak. And I think that was really important. So knocking on doors, maybe I had an advantage because all I really want to do was listen. And I had to listen because I'm better at listening in Spanish than I am at talking. So that was one thing that was definitely an advantage just off the bat. And I frankly just like to listen to people, and I like to hear their stories, and I like to hear about their lives and how they immigrated here. Because, like the story of how my family immigrated from India to America, to Queens, and how a lot of other families immigrated here is very similar. And so I would start from that, like what I learned is that my family story is similar to everyone else's. When my parents immigrated here, my mother was working as a seamstress in a knitting factory in Queens. And she was just literally, she was sewing in a factory. And, New York City was in the garment district. And then she kind of worked her way through there. And, she had a degree in, like botanical sciences, some sort of like chemistry background. And, but, when you immigrate here from another country, you're degrees and your education isn't always respected and honored.
And your slate is kind of wiped clean.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And we face that, and so does all the communities that I met in West New York. You know.
We'll definitely talk more about more of these interactions,
Okay.
communities that you encountered, and some of their stories, and how there's so many similarities, regardless of where it is you come from or where you are now. But we'll be right back after this short break. Keep watching. Welcome back, everyone. You're watching Straight Talk. I'm Aashmeeta, and I'm sitting with Mr. Adil Ahmed, who recently ran for commissioner of West New York. And we're talking about his experiences, not just with the campaign of someone running at a local level, but the encounters he had with the people. And, you know, continuing our conversation, Adil, from before we left, you were telling me about how you were sharing not just your story, you know, as a second generation American Indian, Indian American, excuse me, but how those stories are really similar across the board, right?
Yes.
With a lot of people that you encountered. In your conversations, you know, what were some of the things that came up that you would say, okay, this is what the people need, you know, this is what I have to focus on in my campaign?
Yes, yes. Thank you for bubbling it down to like some of the, getting to like the specifics, because I think a lot of the issues that people in West New York were facing are common to what small towns, big cities face all across the United States. And so in West New York, the big issues that I was hearing was about parks, so infrastructure, and making sure that young families had places that they could send their children to play that were safe, clean, and interactive. Affordability. Affordability is very important all across the U.S., but especially in big cities. And we had a plan to tackle that, especially when it came to rents and rent control housing, and making sure that the town prioritized developments that provided for affordable shopping in town. And then also thinking about transparency. You know, a big thing in our town, I think all across the United States, is just trust of government. Like, do you trust the decisions the government is making? That's at the federal level, at the state level, and even at the hyper-local level like West New York. It's, at the end of the day, do I think they're making a decision that is in the best interest of the people? And so, for example, with that, you know, we had a very specific policy. So a lot of people would ask, Adil, you know, can you bring down the taxes? You know, or, you know, are you going to, and the answer to that would be, I cannot guarantee that, you know, and no one can guarantee that. And, but one thing we can do is institute measures to make sure that the town was being very forthright with the community about how they were spending taxpayer money. And so in like a very small town, you know, big city like West New York, is parking. You know, it's a hyper dense area where people can't find parking. And literally, you know, every night, every morning, folks are spending hours finding parking spots, or, you know, trying to find that spot for the few days before the sweeper comes around. And it takes a while.
Or they're getting a lot of tickets.
Getting a lot of tickets, yes. And in West New York, you know, we have an independent parking authority. And so there's a government, and then there's another government that operates separately from the town. And, you know, West New York only really operates 954 parking spaces. There's lots of parking spaces on the street, which go into the thousands. But in terms of like public parking lots, it's about 954. And so when you think about what it takes to manage that, it really isn't a lot. But there's a big government that's sort of overseeing that. So one thing that I proposed was that that authority should be dissolved and merged into the town. Because when you have an independent authority, then, you know, like a government, like it's like a shadow government, doesn't really report to the community.
No transparency.
Exactly. And so that is really kind of how I tried to show people that I was really serious about making sure the government was working for them. You know, and this was like a specific measure about making sure that that happened. So affordability was really important. You know, we tackled affordability by in a few ways. You know, there's a lot of development going on in our area.
Like small business development?
No, like luxury housing development.
Oh, wow.
And so, you know, like especially when you live along the Gold Coast like we do, we have views of Manhattan, you expect people to want to build luxury housing. Now, what happens there is West New York is so dense that they're building luxury housing in the community, and it's pricing people out. And so, and then they're building luxury housing developments that don't have affordable units in them. And so what's happening is, you're building these units up and the prices are going up all around the area, and then people can't afford the rents, and then they're literally being forced to leave.
Wow.
Now, the problem with that in West New York that I think is symbolic of why a lot of people, move out to suburbs all across the United States is because you're forced to. If you were thinking about quality of life, you want to live in an area where you have arts, culture, access to sports, access to public transportation, and you want to live in areas where you can access everything in the world. And so people would prefer to live in an area where you could have all of those amenities. But when you get priced out, that becomes, your quality of life suffers. You have to buy a car then, and then you have to think about transportation everywhere. Every time you go somewhere, you have to think about your kids and how they're going to go to school every day. They can't walk anymore. Even buying groceries or, doing food delivery, it all becomes a lot more expensive. And so sort of stepping back a little bit to West New York, we were trying to, another one of our proposals was making sure that the town had a really strong office of rent control. And so in our town, the rent control office is very small, but there's several rent control buildings in our town of West New York. And so what rent control means is that the rent in a specific building can only go up a certain amount so that it stays affordable for the people who have applied to live there and who need that housing to sort of live their everyday lives. And it's important. It's important to have economic diversity, especially in West New York, because it's the frontier of the end of access to New York City. So if you're not in West New York anymore, you have to go to another county, and it becomes a whole nother way of life. And it's not right to sort of only allow the wealthy to live near urban metropolis, and so our proposal was to create a really strong office of rent control that educated the community about what their rights are. And so I would review leases of community members and really try to get an understanding of what their issues were with their landlords, and really working with business owners too, or landlords too, to make sure that they understood what their obligations were. And it definitely takes a partnership to make sure that a town can run. And I was thinking about a way to make sure that people can stay in their homes while at the same time making sure that those buildings stay the way they are, that the residents were being kicked out. But our government really doesn't think that way. Our government just doesn't staff the office. And that also forces people or convinces people that their government doesn't work for them. And the government isn't something they can trust because the government isn't looking out for their economic well-being.
Well, it begs the question, who does the government work for?
Yes.
Speaking of some of these initiatives, you had quite a impressive slate of campaign issues that you ran on. Specifically, ones that revolve around small businesses, for example, or community and economic development. Tell me a little bit about what your platform was on these issues.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm a big believer in the government playing a role in allowing people to live independent, sustainable lives, and to promote businesses to thrive in areas and to provide services where people would really use them if they were offered. So you have to make sure that those businesses can be successful. So we had a bunch of ways to do that. One was a very basic, simple thing, which was allowing small business owners to put lights in their windows. So in our town, in order to put lights in your windows, technically you're not allowed to. So there's a big street that goes, it's like the main street in town, it's called Bergen Line Avenue. And if you put a light in your window and it shines out too far into the street, you get fined. And I've had so many business owners from South Asian, Middle Eastern, all sorts of backgrounds in our town who are like, my profits are night and day when I have sometimes they just put a light in the window on a Friday night because they know there's traffic, and so they want to bring those people in. So the guy literally was like, I make $3,500 in profit in one night here. I make $100 another night if I just don't have lights, because people just don't know to walk in. And so that was like a very basic thing to convince business owners that if they stay here, then they can be successful, right? It's a basic, very simple thing. If you put lights on, you can advertise, people know you're there. But our government for decades just hasn't allowed that. And it just makes no sense. And so I thought that my background, as an attorney, I've represented young technology companies, startups, real estate developers, small business owners, and folks who, are really trying to do add-ons to their communities and sort of really provide a service, and but they expect that they need to make some money because they need to pay rent and they have to take care of their kids. Businesses aren't like this. It's not an evil thing, And I think sometimes when you live in an area, if you antagonize business owners, what happens is you lose them. And especially in a town like West New York, there's like so many surrounding towns. So another way that I thought we can be competitive in a business development context was West New York has a very large undocumented immigrant community.
Okay.
So here are just the numbers. We have 65,000 people in our town, 22,500 are registered to vote. Now that's like 40,000 people where you're like, or you might be undocumented, you might just not care, might be registered to vote, and you might just be under 18, right?
Yeah.
But that big undocumented community is huge. So what I proposed was that the town create a municipal ID program, so that if you're undocumented, you have a government issued ID, so that you can go around and shop and get discounts at local businesses.
Yeah.
Now, so there's a few benefits of having a municipal ID. One is if you're just walking on the street, and you're undocumented, you could be stopped by ICE. You could be stopped by immigration authorities, and they could legally ask you for your papers.
Of course.
But if you have a municipal ID that shows that, hey, I'm legit. I live here. I'm a resident here.
Yes.
Leave me alone. Let me live my life. And people need to feel that sense of security.
Yeah.
And so, but another part, and we're getting back to the business development part, is it's multi-pronged, right? It's not just about having an ID to show the cops. It's about making sure that you can shop at local businesses. So we have 40,000 people who live in West New York who are not registered to vote. So if you take a pile, it's like 15,000 people are undocumented. That's 15,000 people who are scared, are thinking about their everyday life. They're thinking about what's going to happen to their families, to their kids. Yeah. So if they have incentives to shop locally, if you give them an ID and the government convinces the local businesses to give them discounts, like, hey, come shop at my bookstore and you'll get a discount if you have a municipal ID. You can buy some books for your kids to read for the summer. Yeah. Or, if you want to eat out at a restaurant one night, you can get a discount there, or laundry services, or a laundromat, the list goes on. Yeah. And so that would help so many business owners in our town, because they would have so many more people utilizing those services locally, and they will utilize the services locally because folks live there. They're not going to go travel, if you're low income and you're undocumented, you're not going to travel 15 miles to do your laundry.
I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with low income or undocumented. It's a convenience thing,
right.
No matter where you are on the spectrum, you want the most convenient thing in your day-to-day.
That's right.
That's a great point that you bring up. We're going to keep this conversation going, and I should let our viewers know we actually have a live audience in the studio today. These are all folks that came from West New York to support Adil. They are his friends, family, campaign members. I think there's a neighbor in there. So thanks everyone for coming out, and we'll be back after this short break. Welcome back. You're watching Straight Talk, and tonight we're talking with Mr. Adil Ahmed of New Jersey. He is taking politics to the hyperlocal level and sharing some of his experiences with all of us here, and we'll hopefully have some advice for the rest of you out there that are thinking about getting involved or want to know what the process is like. Or what kind of change you can bring about, right? So where we left off, we were talking about some of your policies, specifically what you would do for small businesses, what you would do for minorities or underserviced populations in our communities. We left off a little bit on economic development. So tell me what you're going to say about that.
Okay, yes. So economic development is, so that, there's helping small business owners, and there's economic development where you help everyone thrive. You help people find places they can shop. You help bring in tourists. You help them bring in visitors. You help making it a place where people just want to be around. And so there's two economic development policies that we brought up that I thought were good and that resonated really well with the community. And so one was like a shuttle service between. So West New York is one of those towns that has a big waterfront, and then also has a town like up on a hill. And so literally it's a tale of two towns. You know, you have like a waterfront living community, and then you have the rest of the town that lives on a hill which overlooks Manhattan, but it's not waterfront. And so that's where the rest of the community lives. It's not high income, it's everything, you know. And so one thing that I thought would be very helpful in integrating the community and promoting business development all across town was a shuttle service that connected the town in a way that intersected between the waterfront and the town. And so when you have a big hill, it's difficult for people to get down the hill, you know? And there's so many vacant shopping areas on the waterfront. It's literally just luxury housing. But on the ground floors, there's no places to shop. And so when you think about a large community like West New York, if you facilitated foot traffic on the waterfront, it would create a whole nother city. Because
a marketplace for people to go, right?
Exactly, that's a great word for it. It would be a marketplace. And it would be an area where people could walk around and shop and spend the day and hang out on the waterfront and take the bus home. And it would allow businesses who weren't thinking about being there find it to be a much more attractive place to do business. And so I think that was something that we talked a lot about. We got some traction from the community on it, and when I talked to every young person in town in West New York, and I asked a question, and maybe my question was phrased in a way that gave me the answer that I wanted. But the question was to a lot of the young people, when you were growing up in West New York, would you want access to the waterfront? Would you want to go and hang out there and spend time there with your family and friends? And the answer was always yes. And I think it makes sense, right? But right now there is nothing for the town to have access to the waterfront. And I think that would promote economic development because they would create another marketplace, like you so aptly said. And so I think that was one of our big kind of economic development topics.
So, you know, you had these initiatives, and of course they sound great, but now there's other folks, you know, in these positions of power. These initiatives still sound like they need to be implemented at some level. Where do they stand now?
Yes, so you know, it's really up to us to keep pushing for these issues because at the end of the day, we were the ones who created them, and we were the ones who were pushing them, and they weren't. You know, the campaign in this town, and like every other town, big town in Jersey, it's literally a finger pointing game. You know, like who's the most corrupt person in the game, and so it's like the least corrupt person is the one who gets elected, right? And so I don't expect things to change in terms of those ideas being able to be implemented. But you know, listen, like, you know, we performed very well in this election, and the whole point of public service, the whole point of politics, is to promote good dialogue and to really talk about what the community wants. And so we're going to keep talking about it, and we're going to be there to be helpful to the government that's in place, and to the extent that, you know, we're going to keep talking about the issues, we're going to keep hosting events, we're going to keep writing op-eds, we're going to be talking about it in the community, and you know, at the end of the day, it will be up to them to decide to move forward on it, and if, you know, they decide not to, then we'll push them, you know, the next election cycle.
Exactly.
But you know, we want the town to be successful, and we want, you know, the region to be successful. So to the extent that you know, folks want to implement those ideas, we're all ears to helping them implement those ideas. You know, if folks want to talk about a shuttle service, well, we had hundreds of conversations about the shuttle service, so we can offer insight and numbers and ideas about what the community wants when it comes to developing something like that, and we can actually execute, and it will be their idea, and they can implement it, and that would be great. You know, it would be beneficial for everyone for that to happen earlier than to happen later. So, you know, I think that's what this is all about, and the whole purpose of running is that we are literally now experts on these awesome ideas, right? And so we own them, we started them, and we're going to keep talking about them, and if someone else wants to implement them, that's great. I'm still going to take some credit, but they'll have the credit on the ones implementing.
I'm going to take one of your lines. When it comes to talking to the community, I want to turn the mic over to some of the folks that have joined us from West New York that are in the audience today. You guys want to participate in the conversation, so let's hear from you.
Hi, my name is Raymond, and I'm one of the young volunteers for West New York for Adil's campaign. I met Adil on the streets, you know, because he's my neighbor. I always saw him walking by. I saw his office always walking by when I get an ice cream. But anyways, I just want to ask a simple question. How does it feel from being an outsider in politics to making an impact for West New York?
Yeah.
Great question. Thank you.
That's a really great question. Wow. That's you're so smart. Okay. And so when I think about it, it feels great being an outsider and making an impact on local politics, because, you know, what is important is to step outside of the bubble and to really sort of not get caught in the way things have been done for decades, you know. And every time when you talk to people in West New York, it's like, how long have you been here for? You know, have you been here like for 40 years? Because you have to be here for 40 years before you run for office. You know that, right? And you know, I think living there for 2 years is enough to understand how things work, right? And it's enough to sort of think outside the bubble to realize how things can be done differently. And I think what I really wanted the youth to understand in this election was, you can be creative. You can think outside the bubble. The way things work isn't the way things have to be. And so just because you see your teachers or your principals or, you know, whatever, cops or business owners do something a certain way, that doesn't mean that's the right thing to do. You have to follow your gut, you have to follow your instincts, and you have to be intellectually curious. And, you know, when you're in school and you hear big ideas and you're learning, like, really explore those ideas. You know, if you think about math and geometry or like recycling, you know, the other day you were telling me about how the climate of the earth has been rising, you know, exponentially and you're right, you know, climate change is a huge issue. And so when you look at our town, right, Ray, like, what is the town doing to address climate change? Nothing, you know. And so, like, what can we do, right? You know, it's an issue now. Like, what can we do to make sure the town is more environmentally responsible? To make sure that, and that comes back to very bread and butter issues. Like, the biggest responsibilities of our town are to clean the streets and to make sure that they're safe. Those are like, and schools. And so when you think about it, it is all integrated. And so I would say, really, you know, as an outsider, I would say everyone should always think like an outsider, because the way things are done isn't the way things have to be.
Yeah, and, you know, to improve, you have to be willing to change, and sometimes you need an outsider to bring about change, right? Once again, great question. Anybody else in the audience?
Hello, my name's Chaz. I'm also a resident of West New York, and I actually met Adil because he actually door knocked my house. Well, one day it was like literally like a snowstorm. It was super cold, and he was knocking on doors, like spreading the good word, and, you know, he had such a good energy. And then, you know, I reached out, you know, Chris and Liz, they had art shows. And they reached out to me and my friends, and then we came, and it's such a good energy. So then I joined part of the campaign. And one thing that's been really special about this campaign is that it's really been on the backbone of like the youth in town. So and that's been super different from everything in our area. So I guess the question I'd ask is, like, what inspired you to reach out to the youth and to have them involved in the town politics?
Yeah. Thanks, Jess. I think one thing, when you think about the youth in town, I feel like the youth are really good at seeing through nonsense, right? Like,
Yes.
Like you can see, like, when you're young, you can feel if something is bad, and you can feel if something is good.
Yep.
And generally, that hunch is the right hunch.
Yeah.
And one thing I realized when you look at politics in the area, young people don't get involved, and it's because they see from a young age how it works. You know, like, you help a little, you get a job. You know, like, you know, or, you know, you have a family member who has to, like, campaign for someone, and they really don't like to do it, but they have to keep their job. And, you know, you sort of hear about this dirty transactional culture of politics, right? And so I think that's why young people don't get involved. And now, to answer your question, like, why did I get young people involved, is because I'm not like that at all. I'm not part of that. And so one thing I realized early on was, if I knew what prevented young people from getting involved in politics, then I realized I could provide a platform for them to get involved, because I'm not part of the reason why they don't want to be. And so a big part of that was, like, selling them on this idea that if you're involved with this, we can create real change. And the change doesn't necessarily have to come in the form of changing the government. The change comes in the dialogue about what people are talking about in changing the town. You know, like, when we were talking about politics in West New York, we were talking about, you know, just the other day, we were talking about, like, this interesting drug rehabilitation program in the school system, and how it makes no sense. Like, there's like a program in the school system where kids who people think are doing drugs are forced to go to this program, where all the other kids where teachers think they're doing drugs are in a room. Now all the kids who are problem kids are all hanging out together, right? And it's a snowball effect, right? You're not creating a good place for people to thrive and become their best selves. And so when you take a step back, I was always questioning those kinds of ideas, right? But like, I feel like the young people in our town weren't always thinking about how do you sort of change what doesn't feel right, what doesn't look right. And so that's one way we did it. You know, another way we did it was through art. And so we have a couple artists here who have been a big part of our campaign. And you know, art is a way. West New York is a very culturally diverse town. 1 out of every 6 people who live in West New York come from a different country. And that is the ratio of diversity in West New York is far higher than any other town in New Jersey. I don't know about that statistic, but the 1 out of 6 is totally on point. And so when you think about diversity, multiculturalism is what it's like the foundation of art, of really good art. Because you're thinking about where your family comes from, you're thinking about what shapes you, your identity, what you're striving for, what you want to see change. And our 2 artists here, I'm not sure if they're going to ask questions, but Chris and Liz helped us sort of create an avenue to bring the youth in through art. And Lily as well. Lily is here as well.
Awesome.
And what we did was we created an avenue for young people to express themselves through art. And it wasn't politics, but it was like, what do you want to see changed? And then I took over from there, right? I was like, you express what you want to see changed, and I will make that relevant for you politically.
Yep. We're going to hear from these guys. I'm really excited. I'm sure our viewers are too, to know how you actually used your art to get involved in politics. That's a fantastic coupling. We'll be back after this short break. Welcome back, everyone that's joining us for this special episode of Straight Talk. I won't take any time. We have a wonderful audience, and they have a lot to say to Mr. Adil Ahmed, who's joining us from West New York, New Jersey.
West New York.
Folks, what do you want to say out there?
Hi, so my name is Lizette Portillo. I actually worked with Adil on the campaign, and I'm actually one of the artists who rose up a whole bunch of art to help bring the youth and, help bring the message across. But what I really wanted to ask Adil was, everyone can gain strength from the battles they fought. So what's your advice for the future generations to come?
The advice I would say is really think about what you care about and what you really want to fight for, and listen to people, listen to others. I think when you listen to other people and you hear about what they care about, you'll realize there's so many similarities, and they will start to care about what you care about because you listen to them. And so that would be my advice, is listen well, but really own what you're passionate about and follow that.
Great. I think we have another artist in the audience.
And I had the pleasure of working with Adil as well. It was a beautiful project where we were able to speak about the diversity and the culture that was from all over the town. But one of the things I really want to ask Adil was what helped you keep moving forward when you were the underdog and things started getting a little bit hectic. How did you keep it under control?
Yeah. Chris,
that's a good question.
So I would say it was our team that really kept me going. You guys, we built a team of people, you guys and all our folks all across town who really cared and who were with us every night. We were knocking on doors, and at night it would be really tough. We'd have our competitors say some really nasty things, and we would realize what we're up against. And I would say it's really having a team of people who got your back, and realizing that you're all in it together and committed. No matter what happens, you're going to sort of support each other and help each other and think through obstacles. And that's what really kept me going, is our team kept me really, really energized. I would start my days oh man, how are we going to do this? But as soon as I was out there in the community, every day I just felt I got this. I was if I'm out there and I'm talking to people and we're with our team, I just felt like I could accomplish anything. So that's how I did it, was building the team and, taking care of each other.
It's a real testament to the team that you have here.
Yes,
and I think we have one more person who wants to speak.
I guess it's not a question, but it's actually a very amazing compliment I would like to give to Adil. Just a fun fact to everybody watching, but he came to my house one day, and it was so interesting because I had heard and seen his name around in articles and posters and stuff, and he came to my house, and I was willing to listen because I'm not really a fan of politics, but someone with such honesty and such composure like Adil is something that I gave an ear to. And I must say, I would like to thank Adil because he gave me that opportunity to campaign with him, as much as I'm helping him right now, coming here into a platform like Just to put West New York, New Jersey in the global map, because it's something not that you see every day in West New York, where people are talking about the issues or talking about certain stuff that's going around. And I'm very proud of the work that he's done, and also the work that also our young generation is doing. And and I hope this definitely inspires everyone who is watching right now, because this is something that it'll definitely get people off trouble that everybody just goes through, and all the some of the kids that are that are usually into trouble doing negative stuff. And I think with this kind of campaign that was running, and I know it'll continue, it'll definitely get those negative kids off the streets doing illegal stuff. And you're, like you said, Adil, to bring art into play. And one question I have actually is do you think that art is something that should be very supportive in our town, because we don't get a lot of that in West New York, New Jersey? So I would like to hear, what is your take on it?
Absolutely. The arts have to be funded in multiple ways, and I think we actually help start the solution by making that a cornerstone of our politics. Because we literally created an art gallery, and every week people would come in and we'd rotate art, and it would come in and out. And when people came in, the first comment was always, "We don't have something like this in our town." And so a lot of times people would say, like, "Whoa, this is it's a gathering place where people can talk about their concerns and their futures and what they care about." And but art is the cornerstone of actually allowing the youth to express themselves. Not everyone's going to be an artist, but I guess the one thing I think in my head is, we have a town that really just focuses on sports. When you think about their investments in youth, like, what are we losing if we're not investing in the arts? Like, did we just lose the next Van Gogh? Like, did we just lose the next Pollock? Like, did we, why are we not investing in creating and inspiring those people to become those famous, renowned artists in the world? Like, we're not investing in creating those. And in a town that is so diverse, we actually have a huge talent pool where we can create that and be proud of the future that we're investing in there. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. We're running low on time. I wish we could keep talking about this, because this is some really great stuff that you're not just proposing, but it seems that the ideas and your thought process behind these propositions is coming from a really solid and real place, and something that connects with the next generation. And ultimately, what is politics if not something to bring you into the future?
Yes.
One last question before we go. What advice do you have for young people, young professionals, folks that have full-time jobs, but they're dismayed at the state of local politics or politics in general? That their government isn't doing what they think it should, that their taxpayers aren't being used in the way that they think they should be. What advice do you have for those people?
Yes. So one thing I would say is, a lot of times the advice people give you is, get involved in your local government, volunteer on a board, like, go to a meeting and express your concerns. And I think that's important. I think that is something that people should do, but I think there's actually something bigger people should be working on. I think they should be talking to their neighbors. I think they should go to their neighbors and they should ask them what they care about, and talk to people they've never met before, and really muster up that courage to stand on a block one day and just talk to people passing by with a notepad and say, you know, what do you think about, you know, the town with this new tax break they're giving, or about this new development going on, or this playground? Like, what do you think about that? Like, spend an hour or 2 hours, if you really care about that issue, just talking to people about that, and then understanding what they think and how they care about it, and then see if the way you feel about it is the way they feel about it. Because if it is, if they're similar, if there's similarities, then you've just become a leader on that issue. You've just become the one person who's asked them about what they think and what they care about. And I guarantee you, no one else has. And so that is the bigger step, I think, that should be taken. And then with that experience and with that background, you can go talk to anyone and say, I just talked to 15 people. Like, really? You talked to 15 people about this issue? Yeah, tell me what you've learned. You're the expert now.
That is simple advice for all of you listening out there, watching. Simple enough that you can do it, you can implement it today. And, you know, one step at a time brings about big changes. Adil, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Everyone who made the journey out here, thank you for coming out to our studios, taking part in the program. To our audiences worldwide, thank you for watching. I was Aashmeeta with Straight Talk.